to support independent research. So this is a fellowship that's open to any student, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. Here, actually, it's not just confined to Iolani, it actually is outside as well, that provides support to do independent research during the summer. So think about applying if you want to do some independent research. And I'm really happy to introduce Jenna Lau and Lily Perry, who worked really hard this summer on 2 apps that they're going to share with you.
I would like to begin my presentation by thanking Mr. K for providing me with the opportunity to do research over the summer. Thank you so much. My name is Lily Perry. My mentor for my project was Ms. Okumura, and my project is called the Peacemon Peace Project. The Millennium Development Goals were adopted in September 2000. There were 8 of them, and the deadline for them to be reached was 2015. However, by 2015, the UN decided that the Millennium Development Goals were too narrow. They did not effectively address poverty and gender inequality, which were some of the root causes of problems that they did attempt to address. In addition, the Millennium Development Goals did not mention human rights or economic development at all. And they were generally seen as targets for poor countries to reach, with rich countries' financial aid. So, when the MDGs expired, the UN moved on to create SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals. These came into effect January 1, 2006, and they are to last for 15 years, with the agenda being reached by 2030. The SDGs set ambitious objectives for addressing prominent world issues such as poverty, gender inequality, and development. With 17 goals and 169 targets that are listed under each goal to add more specifics, the SDGs aim to be long-lasting and make a sustainable world for future generations. The SDGs do address the root causes of poverty, and the United Nations Development Program, or UNDP, says on its website about SDGs, quote, "Achieving the SDGs requires the partnership of governments, private sectors, civil societies, and citizens alike to make sure that we leave a better planet for future generations," unquote. Teaching younger audiences the importance of the SDGs would involve more people with the United Nations goals, and therefore, that is the aim of the Peacemon Peace Project. Now, the SDGs also have 5 Ps. Starting from the top and working clockwise, they are prosperity, partnership, peace, planet, and people. The 5 Ps are a wider grouping of the ideas behind the SDGs. However, there is no specific categorization of which SDG fits solely into which of the 5 Ps. In fact, working towards some of the SDGs can be considered as work towards multiple of the 5 Ps. For example, SDG number 4, which is quality education, is work towards both the Ps of people and prosperity. One question that I had was, how do we get more youth involved? Youth do not often participate in advocacy, so their voices are not heard in politics. However, the issue of sustainable development is one that will have a disproportionate impact on youth, so youth involvement in advocacy is imperative for change to occur. This does not mean that children cannot help lead the movement for sustainable development as well. Children actually have a large impact on family decisions. Time magazine writer Martha White noted, quote, 71% of parents say they solicit opinions from their kids regarding purchases, and more than 2/3 of parents take their kids' views into consideration when making family purchases. Involving children in the movement towards a more sustainable future would effectively involve their parents as well. A child who learns the importance of sustainability will make sustainable decisions his whole life and influence his parents to make sustainable decisions. Exposing children to the idea of sustainability is the first step. The Iolani School Peace and Justice Club girls approached me with an idea to create a Peacemon app. However, they did not know how to code. Their idea was to create a game to promote the awareness of the SDGs, which they learned about in their club meetings. They spent a lot of time and effort creating different Peacemon drawings and Peacemon cards like this, and 2 other cards are shown on the projector. However, again, they did not know how to code, so they presented their idea at a Girls Who Code meeting, and they asked if anyone would be willing to volunteer to help them code this idea that they had. And I volunteered, because I've always loved Pokemon. Their idea was to make a Pokemon-like app with these different kinds of creatures, but the Pokemon shouldn't fight. They should be there to promote peace and sustainability in the world instead. So the purpose of this project was to create a game to promote awareness for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The target audience for the app would be grade school and middle school minors. The first step in my design process was to discuss whether we would make a website or an app. At the start, the Peacemon girls decided that they wanted an app developer's website to be made before the app itself, and they wanted the website to have information about the SDGs. I thought that the website could also have information about how people could go about promoting SDGs in their daily lives. But one issue that we ran into was, how would people find the website? Because there's many other websites also promoting SDGs. The other idea we had was to create a mobile app aimed at children, and it would simply be a fun game to play in your free time. And we decided to go with the app idea. To begin with the app idea, we had a brainstorm process in which I went through 6 different fleshed out iterations of the app, and in the end decided to do an overarching game with different mini games inside. The next step after choosing which games to make was to code, and coding had to be done on an Apple computer because the aim of the game was to be put on the iPads in the end. Finally, we had to test the game on iPads or iPad simulators. One issue that we ran into was copyright. Certain Peacemon looked a lot like different Pokemon. Over here, the top 3 images show Peacemon that the girls made, but the bottom 3 images show Pokemon that are actually in the anime and in the game. So I told the girls, these are very beautiful drawings, but to deal with the copyright issue, maybe we should look towards making Peacemon that are based off of Hawaii's native flora and fauna. After all, Hawaii has many species that are unique to our islands alone. And so these are some of the new Peacemon that the girls developed afterwards. I decided to code the app using Swift and Xcode so that the app could be used for iPads. I wanted the app to be available for iPad users so that Iolani students could try out the app. I already know how to code with Python, which I learned from an HPU class in 9th grade, Arduino from Iolani classes like Robotics in 8th grade and Make It 101 in 9th grade, and Java from AP Computer Science A, which I took in 10th grade. The basics of each coding language are roughly the same, like using variables and loops. However, there are differences in execution. So over here we have images of 4 different coding languages. There's Java, Arduino, Python, and Swift. And each of these pieces of code, when run, prints out a line that says "Hello World." However, as you can tell, the actual way to do this, it looks different, and the writing that you have to put in is different for each language. To learn Swift, I used Apple's free iBook, App Development with Swift. The book gave the basics of Swift, but to address some more complex issues, Google was a little bit more helpful. I would refer to the textbook for simple problems, like how do I declare a variable as a string? But I would refer to Google for more complex problems, like how do I make an object move when I touch it on the screen? This is what I have so far coding-wise. The green blocks are commented out at the moment because they have bugs that I have to work through. And here is what it looks like when you run my code. The tarot is your player, and when you touch the screen, the tarot will jump. The goal is to jump over the water, which you may or may not be able to see is contaminated with nitrogen and phosphorus. Ancient Hawaiians used tarot to filter out water, which is why they would direct their streams of water down the ahupua'a through taro patches, so that the taro could filter out these different nutrients and make the water cleaner. So this game applies to both the SDGs of the 6th SDG, which is clean water and sanitation, and the 14th SDG, which addresses life underwater. The game also applies to the P's of planet and prosperity by helping the environment and helping people who live off of the environment. As the taro jumps over the water, the nutrients are absorbed by the taro. And so you can see that the water behind the taro doesn't have any of the pollutants of nitrogen and phosphorus, whereas the water heading towards the taro does. The idea behind my game was to create different mini games in which you can earn points for playing, which go towards promoting different SDGs. So here's just a few different mini game ideas that I had. The tarot is next to the game that I ended up focusing my summer research on, which was the Endless Runner. One of my challenges that I ran into was selecting an idea. After all, I had 6 different iterations, and it was really hard for me to let some of these ideas go because I thought that I had put so much work into all of them. Another problem that I ran into was creating an object that can actually be viewed, because in the code, I kept having different little bugs, and also the sizing of the object would change where it would appear on the screen. So sometimes the object would appear off screen just due to my sizing and coordinate accidents. Another problem was movement of the objects. I couldn't figure out at first how to make the water move because there was a small bug in the code in which I actually just put the wrong image, and I said that the wrong image should be moving. I had accidentally put in the name of something that didn't exist, and then when I realized that, I went back and I fixed it. Another issue was moving the tarot when the screen was tapped. So I went through a lot of different things on Google trying to figure out how to do this, and I'm still working through it because there's a few bugs in that. When more people are involved with the global goals, we can begin to make a change. And Peacemon attempts to involve more people so that this change can start happening right now, even with younger people in our families. Reflecting back on my experience over the summer, I think that Swift was a very interesting advice to learn. My advice for anyone who would want to apply for the K Fellowship is to be motivated and begin work on your project at the start of the summer. Do not procrastinate and get as much done before beginning school as possible. In addition, it would be nice to not have a long family trip planned as I did. Due to my trip, I had a 3-week period when I couldn't work because I couldn't bring computers out to Australia. And I will be continuing my project over the school year as an independent study course with Ms. Okamura. I hope that by the end of the year, I will have an app running and out on the App Store that people can download and play. I would like to acknowledge, first of all, Mr. K, who created this grant. Thank you again. Ms. Okamura for being a great mentor. Thank you. Dr. Milliken for being a great advisor. Thank you for helping me with the brainstorming process. Dr. Chan for advising me to apply for the grant. None of this would have been possible without your advice and your help along the way. And the Peace and Justice Club girls who created the idea of Peacemon. This entire app originated with them, and I think that without their work to inspire and educate others, I wouldn't be here today presenting in front of you all.
Hi, I'm Jenna. So as Lily was mentioning, I'm also a K Fellow from this summer. Ms. Okamura was also my mentor. So for this summer, I focused my project on app development. And I want to start this presentation by thanking Papa Jack, especially for this amazing opportunity to connect my passions for foreign language education as well as computer science. So when identifying the issue, I thought of what I kind of saw as a foreign language student myself. So I found that language acquisition was kind of difficult in the beginning. So I tried to think of a way of how can I best acquire languages in terms of speaking, listening, writing, in terms of like culture information as well. So I did some research and I found that 18% of students from K to 12 are enrolled in foreign language courses. I also found that a Stanford professor named Russell A. Berman, he had research that described the importance of foreign language education. He basically said that students need the social skills that language provides in order to build a better tomorrow. Also, a Soviet psychologist named Lev Vygotsky found that social interaction helps with allowing your brain to retain better information and understand things. So from that information, I came up with the idea of developing a mobile app to connect students around the world with native speakers in order to facilitate foreign language education inside classroom settings. So as well, teachers would be able to view what their students were doing and connect with other teachers abroad. So here's the timeline. In April, I submitted my proposal, and luckily it was accepted. I began brainstorming and researching also from April to the end of the year. And then beginning in May, I started doing my research. So I gathered data from teachers and students at Yolani. I sent out surveys for students to determine how they felt, how comfortable they felt with language acquisition. And then I also surveyed language teachers here at Yolani about what issues that they saw students faced. So in June, I started the design process, which was really fun. So I looked at layouts, different designs, and I also started thinking about specific features. So that was most likely influenced by the surveys that I gathered. So I'll mention that later on. In July, I began the mobile app development process, which I'm still in the process actually right now. And then later that month, I also met with the CEO and CTO of Shobi. And that was really helpful in trying to see what the actual industry was like and going through all the technical aspects of their app that most of us use here at Yolani. So yeah, as I mentioned before, I am still currently in the mobile app development phase. I'm hoping that in December, I will create a working prototype or some kind of user testing. As I mentioned before, I did some research, data gathering specifically, and I surveyed students, and on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not fluent at all and 10 being very fluent, the average rating that they gave themselves about 5.3. And when I talked to teachers as well, they found that the most important aspect was being able to communicate with speakers abroad in terms of the app features. They also found that students lacked a motivation in terms of language learning, and they also did better with project-based learning and hands-on activities. So for the app design process, I began by brainstorming first. So that was thinking about specific features, which was influenced by the data I collected from teachers. I also went through the design process, which was going over different user experiences, like as I mentioned before, layouts and themes. Then I went on to the development process, which was a very challenging phase for me. It's really interesting though, and I'll get into that later. But so I used a different coding language actually. It's called React Native, built by Facebook. So it's a fairly new coding language. It's a little hard to find resources on it because it's so new. And I focused on this particular coding language because it was best for user experience. And I'd researched other coding languages as well, but they didn't fit the needs of the app as much as this language does. So throughout the process, I also did research. So it was a continuous loop of brainstorm, design, develop, and then research, and then trying to find out how else I can improve the features. So for the design process, here are some resources that I use. So Adobe XD and Sketch are actually programs that you can use to create like wireframes or like mock-ups of your app without actually coding anything. And Muesli and Pinterest are what I got the inspirations from. So talked about design layouts, themes, etc. So for development, as I mentioned before, I used React Native, which was a really eye-opening experience because it was a lot different than coding languages I had experience with in previous classes. I also used Atom, which was like an IDE that basically like holds all your code together. And I also used a thing called Expo, which kind of creates all the file structure in your project. And to learn React Native, I took a class on Udemy by this really great developer named Stephen Grider. So here's some screenshots of my code. And so this is the mockup that I was creating during the design process. So here specifically is the communication aspect of it. This too. Okay. I had the link on there. So I actually have a live demo of the wireframe. Hold on. Okay, there you go. Sorry about that. So this is a little mock-up that I made. So yeah, so I was going to focus it on sign up with Google, So here's some walkthroughs when you're registering. So basic information about your bio. So this is like the dashboard of sorts. So profile, we talk about your own profile, basically your bio. It could include what languages you learn, your hobbies, etc. And they also have a chat feature, which is the most important aspect of this. So here's like a little mock-up of what it could look like. So I was also planning on having an audio and a video feature as well, since it's important for people to be able to hear and actually communicate with speakers abroad instead of just through text. So I wanted to create a very well-rounded platform for students. So if you press like the audio or the video, it makes like this kind of video audio feature. And then another feature that I was developing was this culture board. So basically students can like post stuff about their own culture so others can learn about it. So I have some examples here, like Mid-Autumn Moon Festival, which is actually this week. And then like Children's Day, which is from Japanese culture. So I thought it would be a great way for people to learn about other cultures, just from their own perspective and from students just like them. Finally, I have this collaboration feature, which I was hoping would have some kind of like annotation feature as well. So you can help people with their writing or anything like that. So here's some examples like questions you could ask. You could ask about their culture or ask for help in terms of language acquisition. I thought it was a great way as well, instead of just through text and audio, to communicate with all students rather than just one-on-one to learn about their language or culture or anything like that. So looking back, I think it was a really great experience. I had a lot of fun designing and developing as well, which I'm still in the process of. It was an iterative process, so it was continuously, what can we do to make the app better? Okay, we face an obstacle, how can we address that? How can we go around it? So I'm hoping to have a working prototype by beginning mid-December. And for anyone looking to pursue their own projects, I would suggest start coding. There's really great programs out there like Code Academy, which is a really popular one. Udemy, which I used, so those are like video lessons. Code School is another one. And I'm sure there's a bunch of others as well. You can find them online. So find something you're passionate about, or as a student, like what problem do you face, and try to think of a way of how you can actually address that. And definitely don't be afraid to ask others for help. I think learning from others and their experience is probably the best way for you to learn, rather than just through text or online. So I want to say a special thank you again to Papa Jack for this amazing opportunity to connect my interests of foreign languages and computer science. And I also want to thank my amazing mentor, Ms. Okamura, who spent hours with me every week in the summer in her office. Dr. Chan for guiding me through this tough process. Colin Bram and Roy Pombero as well, who are the CEO and CTO of Shopee. So they had a phone conference with me and we discussed what it was like to be in the industry and specific features of their own app. I also want to thank my awesome language teachers who have been there every step of the way. Lin Lao Shi and Ho Lao Shi, who aren't here today, and Iyomoto Sensei, who I had last year, and Tomotani Sensei as well. Thank you.
Project? Okay. Okay.
Impressive, first of all. I was just wondering what your thoughts on, or how, I know it's a little early, but when you do roll it out, will you do some sort of, I don't want to call it a pilot, I don't know what you call it, but how will you gain feedback from users? And would you use classes at Yolani, or how will you do that? What are your thoughts?
I can say it first. Okay. For mine, since it was really like centered around helping the Peace and Justice girls with their app, I was kind of thinking that I would promote it at Iolani and maybe ask SAO to send out an email to them and ask students to download it and try it out. And then I was thinking I could send out like surveys to students to see what they thought of the app and if they had anything that they wanted to improve or like add into the app, and then try to work on that.
Yeah, so I've actually been thinking about that since before I even proposed the project. So I've actually been in contact with a couple schools abroad, so a couple in Japan, and I've been also been communicating with teachers here. So as like a pilot program of sorts, I guess, I was planning to launch the app and have it being used by language students here at Ilani first, and then see how that goes. Gather some data in terms of like user research, so sending out surveys to both teachers and students to get feedback on how I can improve that, and then hopefully launch to schools abroad.
There are ways to get feedback right within the app, like as someone's using it.
Actually, there is. There's a really cool thing that Google made. So they have this program basically for developers called Firebase. So basically, it kind of embeds in your app, so they can collect all kinds of user data, like what pages they spend most time on, stuff they don't really like. So you can kind of tell the amount of like user clicks that students use.
My question for Jenna, I'm still trying to wrap my brain around what you're trying to accomplish in your app, but it seems like you with me versus the other app, which would, like a single user could use yours, require like a community of users, is that right?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, and so that texting conversation that we saw, that would be between two students, maybe? Or
Yeah, exactly. So I was also planning on having a translation feature as well, which I forgot to mention. So that was just going to be able for students to basically communicate one-on-one, or either in group chat as well, to kind of talk about their own culture or just kind of practice using their skills. Because I know a lot of students like to feel like what they're learning in school is actually applicable to the real world. So I thought that being able to create some kind of large community for everyone to kind of learn from each other was a great way to learn languages.
Or it might include some experts in the field as well, like the teachers or native language speakers, is that your thought, or just mostly students?
Yeah, well, I was actually planning on connecting students to students, and maybe teachers to teachers, just because I feel like people would, it'd be a little more fun and a little more in terms of social interaction with people like communicating with those their age. So they would be learning, like for example, if you're an English student and you're here basically in Ilani and you're studying like French or something like that, and someone is in France learning English, so you guys will be able to communicate, and then I also have a translation feature in case there's certain language barriers that you can't cross.
And this is for both of you. What are your immediate next steps? Because I know the work is not done. It's been a great process, but what might be sort of that next step that you would take on?
Well, I'm just trying to do one feature at a time. So right now, I'm not thinking about the whole app itself. I'm trying to think of, so right now I'm actually focusing on the chat feature because that's the most important aspect of it. So yeah, basically all my just coding right now between probably like now and the next couple weeks is going to be focusing on the chat feature. So yeah, I don't think I want to focus too much on the broad aspect because it might be a little overwhelming. So I want to go basically one feature at a time.
For me, I think that the next steps would be to, first of all, of course, work out the bugs that are in my program at the moment. And also, I'm actually meeting with the Peace and Justice Club later on this week. So I'm going to run this, what I have done so far past them and see if they have any feedback or any ideas that they want me to incorporate more. And then after that, I think I'll just see what else, like what other bugs I might have and what other things that they want me to add.